On my last video, I mentioned that to increase the sensitivity of the steering, I needed to move the hole in on that back steering arm, but that was totally wrong. I need to move the hole in on the front steering arm, and I did that, and everything's good as far as steering goes right now. Okay, these are the forks I'm going to use, the white ones. These came off the bike I cut up. These brakes are awesome. This bike came with no brakes, so I want to put these brakes on these forks, which means this whole little weldment thing needs to go. So this will be a good little challenge all by itself. I'm gonna take this, cut this off, don't need this, take the wheel off, cut these off, finish welding the steering thing because I think it works pretty good. Move forward. Okay, so I cut the existing brackets off and finished welding this and cleaned this all up, and then I went to start cutting the brake off of the bad forks, or the forks we're not using, and they're aluminum, which I wasn't expecting. Anyway, I cut them off, and then this was a tube. I cut the tube in half, got rid of that half, and miraculously there was a factory hole right here. This hole lines up with the factory hole, and they fit pretty good. So I drilled 2 more holes here. I'm going to bolt it together, and I'm going to put some epoxy under it when I'm finished. And we have the front forks are finished and ready for paint. There's nothing else to do to them. So I'd like to make the cargo carrying part out of round tubing where it shows, because it just looks nicer. And round tubing is pretty darn strong for its weight. I have these 2 pieces from a fireplace log rack, and I have some EMT electrical conduit, which is super light but has no strength. And these little pieces of orange pipe, which are fairly heavy. So that's all I have in the way of tubing, round tubing. Now I have some rectangular tubing in different sizes. I have this piece, which I'm probably going to use. And I have some little pieces of 1/2 inch, lots of them. This is too heavy. So I'm going to scratch my head. We're going to build the base. Probably everything that's going to go flat, I'm going to use the square tubing because it's just easier to mess with. And then the part that's going to show, I'll attempt to make it nice looking with these pre-bent curves. Since I don't have a way to bend it, I'll have to use what I got. I went through a little bit of trouble to round this back corner off. This goes like that. And I didn't want anybody to cremate in their ankle, so I just cut 1/4 of a piece of pipe and I notched it where it fit. Welded it in there, and it's a little bit more user-friendly now. It's still metal, it'll still hurt you, but it's not quite as ugly as it was. So with my 90 back here welded out, I've got the sides hung with some clamps, and I'm ready to make my first weld. It'll be right here. I got it 20.5 inches wide. I don't know, it just looked right. And then I've cut up the first of the fireplace log holders into 1/2 rounds, and I'm going to put right here. So I'm going to have to add on to it a little bit, but I have the straight part. So I'll put one of these on each side, and I don't know where the dimensions came from, it just looked right. And I have some little, this is smaller box tubing. I'm going to put 2 more on each side, and then we'll do the front when we get to the front. So I've got the back half of the platform welded up, and the welds are cleaned up from the top. I haven't flipped it over yet. And I took the 2 curved, or took one of the curved pipes, cut it in. Dang it. I took one of the curved black pipes, cut it in half. I added on a little bit at the top, and I got them matching pretty well. They don't have the exact same radius in them. I Got them held in place. I'm going to try to weld them. They're super thin. I had a hard time with that weld up top. That's my next step, is to weld that curve up there. I went ahead and finished off the front with the bigger of the two tubings, and now I will I'll cut this off and put that little half round detail like I did on the back corners. So I got the corner round detail done on the front two corners. Now I'm going to get this pipe, and I'm going to go from here to here like an angle. So the first step, is to add that little piece on to make it wide enough. I'll add a piece on both of them, and then mark this, and then weld this. Man, this stuff isn't any thinner than the bicycle tube, but it doesn't weld very well. It just burns up. This is challenging stuff to weld. Well, they didn't exactly fit first try, but probably less than 20. Matching up pretty good. I'm gonna melt some metal and stick them together. So the last two pieces of that black tube work just right for the sides. I got them fit pretty well. They're both the same. I'm going to weld them up. Okay, good progress today. I'm about finished with the basket. Put a flat bar across the back, a flat bar across the front, and two on the sides. And I had always planned on putting plywood in the bottom, but I never really was sure on what to put on the sides. But I think I'm gonna put a little board, maybe up to here, just to keep little kids' feet from falling off the edge or putting their feet out and then crashing and be bad stuff. All the way around I'll put a board, and if I use a board it's self-supporting. I don't have to go all the way to the top. I was thinking about expanded metal and plastic and all kind of stuff, but a board is the only thing that I can really stop right here and have it be structurally sound. And I cut this little piece out to weld on the inside. I'm going to do that right now because I cut an equal chunk off the other side to give me some more clearance for the front tire. And that's going to be about it for today. I'll have to take it down, turn it over, and do all the welds on the bottom. And after that, it's probably going to be too heavy for me to get up here in the vise. I mean, I can pick it up and get it on the table, but to put it in the vise, I got to hold it with one hand and operate the vise with the other hand, and I don't think that's happening. But pretty much all welded out. So we have an added gusset right here to strengthen this butt weld. I have two added gussets here to strengthen this tube where it was drilled, pretty much drilled in half. And there was a joint here, so I added a gusset to strengthen it. And there was a joint here, and I added a plate top and bottom to strengthen it. There were two joints here, so I put a plate on the side. So even with my questionable welding, I'm really confident that the frame won't break. And I think it's all welded out and preliminary grinding is done. So now I'm going to put the entire bike back together and get the cables all straightened out, because I think I might have to weld some little lugs here and there for the cables to work. And if the bike works properly and everything's lovely, we'll take it apart one more time, clean up the welds one more time, and throw some paint on it. So the bike's going back together, and the front brakes are going to work with the new bracket put on the forks. And I had to cut a little pipe spacer right here because it wouldn't tighten down. I think it had some fancy brake stuff up there before. Had to do the same thing with this bracket. That's a little piece of pipe right there, and that's probably just because I made the post to the tube. It's probably just because I made it that much too long, but that's good now. Got the back wheel on, got the chain put back together. I'm not taking that apart again. That's a pain when you don't have that little fancy brake tool. I think the only cable that's going to work is the back brakes, because I didn't mess with these little cable supports. The shifters, if I remember right, went underneath the bottom bracket and came up, so they're going to be different. Obviously the front brake's different. So that's my next goal, is to get all the cables sorted out and to cut off the old hand grips, which melted into a black ooze that Gojo won't even remove from your hands. It's a mess. On the original bike, the shift cables went down the down tube to the derailleurs. And now they're going to have to follow this tube, but I don't have the little cable stop, so I'm going to cut them off of this one. And I'm thinking about cutting the whole little pad off and putting it in there and welding it, so I don't have to make those teeny tiny little welds, which is not my strong point. So that's the next step. Okay, if I get that tacked on, that's going to take care of the first two. These are some front forks from another bike, a third bike. This bike I cut up when I was making my mini Model T to get the sprockets off the back. And now I'm cutting up the front forks because I'm looking for parts for my kickstand. I need a pipe that pivots inside a pipe, and these forks have little cheap shock absorbers on them, so I was going to use the two parts. And I got into a situation where I knew I shouldn't be doing what I was doing, you know, the little voice in the back of your head, but I wasn't listening. So, onward through the fog, kept on going, and sure enough, what I was thinking was going to happen happened, and no harm. I didn't get hurt, but I definitely destroyed a good blade, a new blade on my abrasive saw. Better use the hand grinder. Well, that didn't go like real super smooth, but what I have now is the start to my kickstand. They're made out of metal, so I can weld them, and I have plastic bushing that fits snug. So if I weld this underneath the bike some kind of way, I'll have my pivot and a non-rattle pivot. So this is step one. This is the start of a kickstand. Gotta have a kickstand for that thing because it's gonna be heavy. So this is the very top part of the front shock. So I cut it short, and there's a plastic bushing. I took the bushing out, and while the bushing was out, I welded this flat plate on there, and I did both sides, and then I put the bushing back and put the two inside part of the front forks together and welded them in the middle. And what I'm hoping is now that I can weld this to the frame without melting the plastic bushing. So I'm ready to put it on the frame, but that big square tube in the middle sticks down and hits, so I'm going to have to put some little spacers for some clearance. Just steady adding weight to this thing. I don't know what it's going to weigh when I'm through. I've got the kickstand legs cut, and I'm going to weld them onto this bar, and really all they need to do is be parallel so it'll look correct. So I'm going to weld this one with it sitting on this one by one, and then I'll move the one by one over there and weld the other one. Okay, we have a kickstand with a spring, and what makes it nice, it doesn't rattle because the pivot point is in that plastic tube from those old front forks. All I need to do is put some either plastic caps here or some wooden caps because this is a sharp edge. But pretty happy with that. I'll put a little WD-40 in there, probably operate a little smoother, but there's no need. So my pivots came in yesterday from McMaster Car, and if you've never dealt with McMaster Car, you should. It's an awesome company as far as hardware goes. So I have the 2 pivots. I don't have the bolts. I got to go get fine thread bolts. I got one, that was it. This is my practice piece, and it works. So I need to do the final piece. It needs to start here and end here, but it doesn't have to follow the same curve. As long as it starts and stops in the same place and it doesn't hit the wheel. So I have a square tubing and I have a conduit bender. I'm going to attempt to bend the curve with the hickey bar. Oh yeah. Oh, I bent it too much. I don't think I can unbend it. Unbend the other end. I got the front swivel on. I brought it to the bike and marked where the back swivel needs to be. So all I need to do is cut it, let's say right here. Cut the head of the bolt off and stick it in there and weld it. And the steering will be done, I think. This little double cable stop that I put on there came out real good, but it don't work because the cables are designed on this bike to come from the bottom. This pulls from the bottom and this comes from the bottom. If I'd have been a better bikey guy, I would have known that. So I'm going to attempt to emancipate it off of here and put it on the down tube, and then the cables will have to come under the bottom. Let's see. So I made a handful of these cable stops, and I just welded the first pair on. And I'm getting ready to weld this one on, and all it is a piece of a bolt and a little hole in one end and a bigger hole in the other end. And I like it because it's got enough mass where I can actually weld it. The ones that come from the factory are just basically sheet metal, and I'm not as good as they are. Well, the fabrication phase is complete. I'm missing a long shift cable, but I got all the welding done with the cable outer part. Both brakes are working, the kickstand works great, steering works good. Need to paint. I need new hand grips. These are like half as long as they should be. And I'm thinking I might get a seat post that goes back because it's kind of a small bike frame. You're sitting up kind of close to the handlebars, but take it home and see if the she who must be obeyed likes it. So the bike was met with a little what's the word? Confusion. She wasn't sure why I made it or what are we going to do with it, and you know, I don't really know myself, but she can ride it, and I can ride it, and it's fun. So I'm going to take it apart and paint it, and I'm really scratching my head on maybe putting an electric motor on it. That may be the next step. There's now an unlimited number of ways you can put electric motor on a bicycle, different battery packs, different configurations. They sell all sorts of kits, and all of them are good enough to take us for a ride around the block or run to the local Albertsons and back. So I'm pretty sure you're going to see a video on that coming up.